Star Wars has made almost $10 billion at the box office. One dude pocketed $6 billion of that because the studio was too stupid to read his contract. Another spent $500 million on a single movie that fans called a piece of shit. 12 films, 50 years of behind-the-scenes drama, and somehow only one of them actually lost money. No wonder Disney keeps milking it. Let's see how the Star Wars movies stack up, budget versus box office. George Lucas was broke and stressed out of his mind making the first Star Wars. The budget started at $8 million, but production ran so far over that Fox had to approve another $3 million after they literally ran out of money. They had to stop filming for 2 weeks. Lucas ended up in the hospital with hypertension and exhaustion. His own crew didn't take the movie seriously. They thought it was going to flop. Lucas showed an early cut to some filmmaker friends, and Steven Spielberg was the only one who liked it. So Lucas is sitting there with a movie nobody believes in, and Fox offers him a deal. They'll pay him $150,000 to write and direct. Lucas says, okay, but I want the sequel rights and all merchandising rights. Fox said sure, they were actually happy about that deal. Why would they care about toys for some weird space movie? Since 1977, those rights have made George Lucas $6 billion. The movie opened in limited theaters to $1.5 million. Then it just kept going. $460 million domestic, $775 million worldwide. It took the highest-grossing title from Jaws and held it for years. But here's my favorite part. A toy company called Kenner got the license to make Star Wars action figures. The movie was such a surprise hit that they couldn't manufacture the toys fast enough for Christmas. So, you know what they did? They sold empty boxes. Literally just a certificate that said, we owe you some action figures. Parents paid money for a promise, and it worked. Lucas made profit on toys that didn't even exist yet. After A New Hope made Lucas rich, he decided to finance the sequel himself. He didn't want Fox telling him what to do. He wanted total creative control. The original budget was $8 million. It ended up costing $30.5 million. Everything went wrong. They shot the Hoth scenes in Norway and it was supposed to take 2 weeks. It took months. The whole production fell behind schedule immediately. Money started running out. Lucas went to Bank of America for a loan extension and they said no. So Lucasfilm actually told staff to lie about the budget. There's a memo where they instructed people to say the film cost $17 million when it was nearly double that. Lucas was staring at financial ruin. So he had to crawl back to Fox. They agreed to help, but they wanted a bigger cut of the profits. A Fox executive named Alan Ladd Jr. did Lucas a huge favor, though. He let Lucas keep all the sequel and merchandise rights, even though Lucas had zero leverage at that point. When Fox shareholders found out, they were furious. Ladd lost his job over it. The movie opened to $4 million and finished with $291 million domestic, $549 worldwide. Best Rotten Tomatoes score in the franchise, and Lucas took his next project, Raiders of the Lost Ark, to Paramount. Wouldn't give Fox another chance. The guy sure held grudges. After the budget nightmare of Empire, Lucas was done taking risks. He set a production schedule 6 weeks shorter than Empire's. He picked a director specifically because the guy was known for staying on budget. This time, the money came first, but the real drama was behind the scenes. Lucas blamed his producer Gary Kurtz for Empire's budget disaster. Kurtz was out, but Kurtz didn't go quietly. He started talking about what was really going on at Lucasfilm. See, by this point, toy sales were making 3 times what the actual movies made, and Kurtz claimed that was driving creative decisions. The original ending of Jedi was supposed to be dark. Han Solo would die halfway through during a raid, Leia would struggle with becoming queen, Luke would walk off alone into the sunset like a spaghetti western. Lucas vetoed all of it. Harrison Ford later said Lucas told him there was no future in dead Han toys. The original plan had Wookiees in the finale, but Wookiees were big and expensive. You know what's small and cheap and sells more toys? Ewoks. So the Wookiee planet became the Ewok planet. The dark ending became dancing teddy bears. The movie cost $32 million, made $475 million worldwide, 14 times its budget. Lucas got exactly what he wanted. Whether the fans did is a different question. 16 years. That's how long fans waited between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. 16 years without a Star Wars movie. Gen Z might not understand this, but in 1999, a new Star Wars film was an event like nothing else. An estimated 2.2 million Americans skipped work for the premiere. Someone calculated that was about $293 million in lost productivity, nearly 3 times the film's actual budget just in people not showing up to their jobs. Lucas bankrolled the entire $115 million himself, no studio interference, nobody who could tell him no. He spent $20 million just on advertising and cut deals with Hasbro, Lego, and Pepsi. The Pepsi deal was so big that when Wall Street analysts saw the collectible cans, Pepsi stock jumped $1.50 per share. The movie opened on a Wednesday to $64 million and finished with $474 million domestic. It crossed $1 billion worldwide. First Star Wars film to do that. But remember what Gary Kurtz warned about? Merchandise driving creative decisions. There was a character in Phantom Menace named Jar Jar Binks, designed to sell toys to kids. The backlash was insane. Years later, the actor who played him, Ahmed Best, revealed he thought about taking his own life because of how much hate he got. The merchandising-first approach that Kurtz criticized had real consequences. But the money kept rolling in, so nothing changed. Lucas didn't care if people liked Phantom Menace. He had a different obsession already. He wanted to stop shooting on film, go fully digital. Problem was, the cameras he needed hadn't been invented yet. So he called Sony and told them to build one. A cinema camera that could shoot digital at 24 frames per second, same as film. Nobody had ever made a major movie this way before. Lucas would be the guinea pig for his own experiment. They shipped out to Tunisia with these brand new cameras. Middle of the desert, brutal conditions. Producer Rick McCallum said there wasn't a single film camera anywhere on set. No backup. If the Sony prototypes failed, $115 million would be sitting in the sand with nothing to show for it. But the cameras held, the footage worked, and Lucas got his digital movie. Attack of the Clones came out 2 weeks after Spider-Man. Spider-Man had just become the first film ever to open above $100 million. It was everywhere. Attack of the Clones opened to $80 million, which sounds fine. Until you remember this was Star Wars trying to recover from Phantom Menace backlash with a worse Rotten Tomatoes score. $653 million worldwide. Any other franchise would celebrate. For Star Wars, people called it a disappointment. But Lucas got what he actually wanted. Those Sony cameras were barely better than a modern webcam, but theaters saw that digital projection worked. Within a few years, film reels started disappearing. Lucas's gamble ended up killing 35mm film forever. He lost the summer to Spider-Man, but he basically won the next century of cinema. After Empire Strikes Back nearly bankrupted him, Lucas got careful. Really careful. All 3 prequels cost exactly $115 million. Same budget in 1999, 2002, and 2005. He'd figured out exactly what a Star Wars movie should cost, and he stuck to it. By 2005, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings had both become bigger cultural events than Star Wars. But Lucas still had one card nobody else had. This was the movie where Anakin becomes Vader. Fans had waited for this for 22 years. They could complain about Jar Jar Binks all they wanted. They were showing up for this one. Revenge of the Sith opened to $108 million and finished at $868 worldwide. Best reviews of the prequel trilogy beat Harry Potter domestically that year. And then Lucas walked away. This was the last Star Wars movie where one person had total control. He wrote it, directed it, financed it. Within a few years, he'd sell the company to Disney for $4 billion and watch them make Star Wars by committee. You forgot this movie existed. I know you did. It's animated, it came out in August. And unless you were deep into Star Wars fandom in 2008, you had no idea it was even in theaters. Lowest grossing Star Wars movie ever. $68 million worldwide on an $8.5 million budget. Sounds like a failure, right? But it's actually kind of genius. Lucas wasn't trying to make a hit. He was launching a TV show. Cartoon Network had agreed to air an animated Clone Wars series, and Lucas needed something to get people's attention. So he took a few episodes, edited them into a movie, and released it theatrically. The movie got mediocre reviews and empty theaters. Then the show premiered. It ran for 6 seasons on Cartoon Network, moved to Netflix, then moved to Disney+. Over time, Clone Wars became one of the most beloved pieces of Star Wars content outside the original trilogy. Lucas spent $8.5 million, made $68 million back at the box office, launched a show that ran for over a decade, and built a fan base that would keep paying for Star Wars content long after he sold the company. Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012 for $4 billion, and they immediately had a problem. The last Star Wars movie had been 10 years ago, the last good one had been 32 years ago, and half the fan base was still mad about the prequels. They had to get this right, so they spent more money than anyone had ever spent on a movie before. $533 million before tax credits, $447 million after. Most expensive film ever made at that point. Harrison Ford alone cost somewhere between $10 and $20 million base salary, plus 0.5% of the gross, plus another million after a hydraulic door on set crushed his leg. Disney spent another $175 million just on marketing. They were not messing around. This was a $4 billion bet on a franchise that half the fan base was still mad about. The Force Awakens opened in December to $247 million. Biggest opening weekend in history. Beat the record Jurassic World had just set by $39 million. It played through the holidays and finished with $936 million domestic, just over $2 billion worldwide. Disney made back a third of what they paid for Lucasfilm with just one movie. Disney shot an entire Star Wars movie and it wasn't working. Gareth Edwards directed it, Lucasfilm watched the cut, and they knew something was wrong. So they brought in a guy named Tony Gilroy to fix it. Gilroy is what Hollywood calls a script doctor. When your movie is broken, he's the surgeon who opens it up and makes it work again. They paid him $5 million for the job. Gilroy later said something that would piss off most Star Wars fans. He admitted he had absolutely no reverence for the franchise, and he claimed that was actually his superpower. He could look at the movie without getting precious about it and just focus on what was broken. The biggest thing he changed was the ending. In Edwards' original cut, only the robot was supposed to die at the end. Everyone else survived. Gilroy looked at that and said no. Kill them all. Every main character dies. It was a massive change, probably the biggest creative decision in the whole production. And when the movie came out, that ending became the single best thing about it. A proof that Star Wars could still surprise people. Rogue One crossed $1 billion worldwide, and all that messy behind-the-scenes drama led directly to Gilroy creating Andor a few years later, which people now call some of the best Star Wars content that's ever been made. You want to understand The Last Jedi, just look at Rotten Tomatoes. The critic score is one of the highest in the entire franchise. The audience score is one of the lowest. Some people think it's great, some people think it ruined Luke Skywalker, and there's basically nobody in the middle. But there's something that made the backlash way worse, and it came from inside the house. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, hated what they did with his character. He read Rian Johnson's script and told him straight up that he fundamentally disagreed with every single choice Johnson had made. Most actors would keep that private. You do the movie, you cash the check, you say nice things in interviews. That's how it works. Hamill didn't do that. He talked about his disagreements during the press tour. When the star of your franchise is publicly saying he doesn't like what you did to his character, that gives fans permission to feel the same way. It basically validates the backlash. And the backlash on this movie was massive. The Last Jedi opened to $220 million, which was solid but already below Force Awakens. Then it dropped off hard. The multiplier was only 2.8, which for a Star Wars movie in December is bad. It finished with $620 million domestic, $1.3 billion worldwide. That's almost $700 million less than Force Awakens made just 2 years earlier with the same characters and the same studio. The audience started walking away. This is the only Star Wars movie that actually lost money, and the production was a complete circus. Disney hired Phil Lord and Christopher Miller to direct a young Han Solo movie. These guys made the Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street. They're legitimately talented filmmakers. They know what they're doing. They also have a very specific style. They like to improvise, keep things loose on set. Lucasfilm did not want loose. Lord and Miller were basically running the production like an improv comedy workshop. They'd have actors try lines different ways, riff on scenes, find stuff in the moment. This was a $200 million Star Wars tentpole, and they were treating it like a comedy lab. Lucasfilm looked at the footage and panicked. Lord and Miller got fired. Ron Howard stepped in 2 days later. He's the safe pair of hands, the guy you call when you need a professional to clean up a mess. He ended up reshooting about 70% of the entire movie. Some actors weren't even available anymore, so roles had to be recast midway through. The budget may have doubled from all the extra work. And after all that money and all that effort to save the production, nobody showed up to watch it. Solo opened to $84 million, the lowest opening for any Disney Star Wars film by a huge margin. It finished its run with $393 million worldwide, which is only 1.4 times its production budget. That means it lost money. Estimates put the losses at over $150 million. Disney CEO Bob Iger responded by hitting pause on the entire franchise. That's actually why there wasn't another Star Wars movie in theaters until 2026. Solo bombed so bad that it killed the franchise's theatrical pipeline for 7 years. J.J. Abrams came back to close out the Skywalker saga. He'd kicked off the sequel trilogy with Force Awakens and made pretty much everyone happy, so the thinking was he could land the plane too. 9 movies spanning 4 decades, all building to this conclusion. Instead, we got something like the Lost finale, or Star Trek Into Darkness, or basically every other time Abrams had to stick an ending and disappointed everyone. You have to remember what was happening in 2019. Avengers Endgame came out and shattered every box office record. Game of Thrones had its finale and broke the internet with how badly it ended. The Mandalorian launched on Disney Plus and reminded people what they actually loved about Star Wars. Rise of Skywalker had to compete with all of that, and it just couldn't. It opened to $177 million. It crossed $1 billion worldwide. But it didn't crack the top 5 highest grossers of the year, which had never happened to a Skywalker movie before. People showed up out of obligation and pretty much hated it. Forbes got access to the real numbers, and this is where it gets ugly. The actual production budget wasn't $275 million like Disney claimed. It was $582 million, more than double what they told everyone. They spent over $500 million on this movie, and despite that, the editing team had 3 months less time than they'd had on Force Awakens because Disney refused to move the December release date. So they threw all that money at it and still rushed it out the door unfinished. Now we just have to wait and see how Mandalorian will perform in theaters this summer. My bet, it's going to flop.